Before you buy another probiotic or cut another food group out of your diet, let's talk about what gut health really means. In this video, I will walk you through the science, the myths, and what actually helps improve your gut. Hi, I'm Karen McIver, a registered dietitian who helps young and middle-aged adults reduce their risk of developing chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer. If you don't have the time or the money to see a registered dietitian, this is the channel for you. When I say gut health, you might think that I am referring to your stomach or maybe your whole GI tract, but what I'm really talking about is the number and the diversity of all the microorganisms that live in your large intestine specifically. And you have microorganisms that live other places on your body, in your body, like on your skin, in your genitals, in your mouth, but almost all of the microorganisms that make up your microbiome live within your large intestine or your gut. Now, in the rest of this video and the rest of my gut health series, I will refer to these microorganisms that live in your gut as bugs, just because it's easier. Gut health is a hot topic right now, both in research and in pop culture, and for good reason. We're finding that your microbiome is actually connected to your heart, your brain, even your metabolism. But we're really just at the beginning of understanding what is going on in there. So we know some stuff, but we don't necessarily have definitive information about everything when it comes to gut health. This is my first video on the microbiome, but there are several more to come. So if you are interested in this topic, be sure to subscribe now for the rest of those videos. One thing that we do know about the microbiome at this point is that people who have more microorganisms or more bugs overall, and people who have more diversity in the families or strains, as we'll call them, of bugs that live in their gut, they tend to be healthier. And by healthier, I mean they tend to have a more stable body weight, they tend to have more regular bowel movements, and they tend to have fewer chronic diseases. But so far, we don't have an exact picture of what a healthy microbiome is supposed to look like. And that is because all healthy people whose microbiomes that we study, their microbiomes look different. You can sort of think about this like the populations of Kyoto, Japan and Lisbon, Portugal. They both have about 1.5 million people, but when you dig into who actually lives there, they're totally different communities. We also know that there are some strains of microorganisms that tend to show up most often in healthy people, and there are some strains of microorganisms that tend to show up more often in less healthy people. So we're starting to get an idea of what a healthy gut microbiome looks like, but it's always going to be individual and it's always going to be personalized. And the reason our microbiomes are always going to look somewhat different, even within healthy people, is because there are a lot of different factors that can impact the community that lives in your gut. Now, just like most things related to our health, there are some things that impact our gut microbiome that we can control, and there are some things that impact our microbiome that we can't really control. On this channel, we always focus on the things that you can control, these things that we call modifiable risk factors. But just so you're aware, there are some other things that can play a role. And the last scene setting thing I want to tell you is that your microbiome is both somewhat fluid, meaning as your behaviors, as your lifestyle changes, your microbiome will change, but there's also somewhat of a steady state, meaning that you kind of have a baseline community that your body will return to, again, as your behaviors also return back to what is normal for you. So let's start with two things that you can control that impact your microbiome. The first is diet, so what you're eating, and the second is lifestyle, or how you're exercising, how much you're sleeping, how stressed you are, those other kind of lifestyle factors. Eating foods like whole grains or high fiber carbohydrates, fermented foods, or foods with a bunch of polyphenols, which are compounds that we get from really richly colored foods, like deep colored berries, deep colored greens, as well as sleeping enough and sleeping well, getting enough and the right kind of exercise, and managing our stress all tend to improve our gut health. Meanwhile, eating really high amounts of added sugar, red meat, alcohol, even artificial sweeteners, as well as things like jet lag or shift work that really impact our sleep schedule, and times of high stress all tend to be negative for our microbiome. Now, I'm going to go into a ton of detail on those things in another video when I talk about probiotic supplements, probiotic foods, prebiotic supplements, some things that impact your gut health and you can maybe or kind of control are your medication usage and your environmental exposures. A major player in just how many microorganisms you have in your gut is if you're taking antibiotics. Now, the whole goal of antibiotics is to kill certain organisms causing an infection or a condition that you're dealing with. So these days, doctors are really good about prescribing what's called specific antibiotics, which means they're only going to work on a certain portion of the population of microorganisms that live within your body. But it is going to kill off some of the microorganisms that are doing good things for your gut. And this is why people who are taking antibiotics almost always experience some level of diarrhea or constipation or even things like yeast infections. Because for that short amount of time when they are taking that medication, we have altered the microbiome in some way. Now, as soon as you stop taking the antibiotics, your gut is going to return over time to, again, what is your normal. NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin or ibuprofen, taking them for an extended period of time can also disrupt our gut, as well as some medications for diabetes and for acid reflux. However, a healthy diet can help restore the balance in your gut. So if you're taking some of these important medications, don't come off of them. Now, where you live and if you have pets will also play a role in your microbiome. Now, we absorb some of the microorganisms in our gut from our environment. So if you live in the city, you are going to be absorbing different microorganisms than if you were to live in a more rural part of the country. Similarly, if you have dogs or cats or other pets that go outside and bring things back into your environment, you are going to be bringing in different microorganisms than if you didn't have pets. This isn't necessarily good or bad, so don't let your microbiome be the thing that keeps you from getting a dog. These things can change, but they're certainly less modifiable than your diet. Now, some things that play a role in our microbiome that you can't really control at all are your genetics and your early life exposures. So if you were born via C-section or you mostly drank formula as an infant, your microbiome is going to look different than if you were born via vaginal birth or if you breastfed. Now, neither of those things are really things you can change at this point in your life, but they will help explain your steady state microbiome. So let's get into understanding how to know if your microbiome is off. When there is an imbalance in your gut, either because you have too few microorganisms or you have too many of a certain strain as opposed to the other strains in your body, it's called gut dysbiosis. Gas, constipation, diarrhea, just changes in what is a normal bowel movement for you. Abdominal pain, cramping, undigested food in your stool. If you're experiencing brain fog, fatigue, mood swings, depression, anxiety, maybe skin changes like eczema, rash, acne, sleep disturbances, bad breath, or some other things related to digestion, you might be experiencing gut dysbiosis. But there are a lot of things that could be causing you to experience some of these symptoms. For instance, if you've had too much caffeine, that might change your bowel movements. It may cause anxiety. It may cause sleep disturbances if you've had that caffeine too late in the day. If you haven't had enough carbohydrates or enough calories overall, that could be causing a problem with brain fog or fatigue. If you have a food allergy or a food intolerance, that could be causing your skin issues. You may also just be experiencing a time of hormonal fluctuation through normal puberty or menopause or something like that. So addressing these symptoms might not even mean doing anything about your microbiome. There's also no good way to test what's going on with your microbiome at home. Now, I know there are tests that you can buy online and that some influencers are trying to sell you that will do an at-home analysis of your stool sample. We are really just too early in the process of understanding what's going on in the microbiome for those tests to be really reliable. And so you can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy on those kits, but they're probably not going to be able to actually solve your issues. I also want to mention here that leaky gut is not a real condition. Again, it's something that you can find a lot of information about on the internet, and there are a lot of people who will try to sell you leaky gut supplements or leaky gut cures. Leaky gut is not a real thing. Now that's going to piss some people off, so let me explain a little bit further. There is a condition called increased gut permeability, and that can be caused by undiagnosed conditions like celiac disease, where the cells along your digestive tract do start to open up a little bit, and they allow more of those microorganisms out of your large intestine. And when we see that migration of microorganisms from inside the large intestine to outside of the large intestine, whether that's up into your small intestine or into other parts of your body, they're no longer part of a healthy gut microbiome. They are then pathogens. And so that increased gut permeability is a problem, but that problem is not called leaky gut. And increased gut permeability cannot be diagnosed at home by symptoms or even by a stool sample. The only way to understand if you are experiencing increased gut permeability is to have a GI doctor do an in-office test where they are actually looking at those cells to see how they line up. Another thing to understand about these symptoms is that if you're only experiencing them for a day or two, it's probably not something that's related to gut dysbiosis. If it's a temporary problem, it's probably more related to a one-time or a short-term change in your behaviors or your normal intake. It's when you're experiencing some of these symptoms for, weeks, months, years, that's when we really want to start investigating maybe what your microbiome and what your gut bug community looks like and try to make some changes. So the quick and dirty here is that if you are eating 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, you're limiting your added sugar, your red meat, and your alcohol, you're sleeping enough and well, and you're getting regular exercise, and you're not taking antibiotics, your gut microbiome is probably doing just fine. You probably don't need to worry about messing with. However, most Americans are not nailing that list of things that I just rambled on. We're not eating enough fiber. We're not eating enough vitamins and minerals. We're eating too much added sugar. We're probably getting too much red meat. So if that sounds like you and you think you do have some room for improvement, I highly recommend you download either my free fiber ebook or my free vegetable ebook, which I will link down in the description. Those are going to be the easiest places to start making changes to your microbiome before you worry about things like supplements, stool testing, leaky gut, etc. So that's it for this one. In my next video, I am going to do a deep dive into probiotic supplements and probiotic foods. If that sounds good to you, would love if you would subscribe to this channel. And if you learned something from this video, give me a thumbs up. It really helps the YouTube algorithm understand that this was a useful video and to show it to more people like you. And thank you so much for being here.